The soft beep of the alarm jarred Alden Pritchard from a fitful sleep. His tiny quarters aboard Auriga 9 were bathed in the artificial glow of simulated dawn, the space station's rhythm dictating when night should end, regardless of what the endless void beyond suggested. He groaned, reaching to silence the persistent tone, while simultaneously trying to keep his pet gecko from scuttling off the sleeping platform. "Easy, Orion," he murmured, gently guiding the tiny reptile back to its heated rock. "Another glorious day in the void awaits us both." Orion blinked one eye, then the other. His expression, if geckos could be said to have expressions, suggesting profound disinterest in Alden's sarcasm. The year was 2274, and humanity had spread across the solar system in a patchwork of colonies, outposts, and orbital stations like Auriga 9. As civilizations went, it wasn't particularly impressive. They'd managed not to destroy themselves, which was something. But the grand dreams of interstellar exploration had faltered against the harsh realities of cosmic distance. Instead, humanity had turned inward, developing complex bureaucracies to manage their limited domain with obsessive efficiency. Alden's place in this carefully regulated society was simple. Package courier, grade 3, assignment block D7. For 5 years, he'd navigated the cramped corridors of Auriga 9, delivering everything from critical medical supplies to frivolous luxury items for the station's elite. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep his quarters and feed both himself and Orion. Most days, that seemed sufficient. Station morning. Standard protocols engaged," announced the station's AI through the comm system. "Atmospheric pressure optimal. Recycling systems functioning at 96% efficiency. Cargo delivery schedules updated to terminals." Alden shuffled to his compact food preparation unit and pressed the sequence for standard morning nutrition. The synthesizer hummed briefly before producing a beige substance that, according to the station nutritionists, contained all essential vitamins and proteins required for human function. It tasted like cardboard that had briefly contemplated becoming food. "Delicious as always," he muttered, forcing down several spoonfuls before setting aside the remainder. He'd grab something from the commissary later, maybe even splurge on actual coffee if his delivery route took him near the hydroponics sector. His personal console pinged with the day's assignments. Late shift again, which meant he'd be delivering packages while most of the station slept. Perfect for avoiding small talk with recipients, but miserable for maintaining any semblance of a social life. Not that Alden had much of one to begin with. The few co-workers he might have called friends had transferred to Mars colonies or lunar bases months ago. The station's rigid social hierarchy didn't make it easy to form new connections. Couriers mingled with couriers, administrators with administrators, and the scientific elite with their own kind. Auriga 9's unspoken caste system functioned smoothly, precisely because everyone knew their place and stayed in it. With hours before his shift began, Alden decided to take advantage of the relative quiet to visit the observation deck. It wasn't officially restricted to couriers, though the disapproving glances from higher-ranking personnel often made it feel that way. Today, however, he found it blissfully empty. The vast curve of Earth dominated the view, blue and white and achingly beautiful against the darkness. Sunlight glinted off the edges of solar arrays extending from the station like metallic wings. In the distance, transport vessels traced slow arcs between other orbital platforms, their navigation lights blinking in steady patterns. "Worth getting up for," Alden whispered to himself, pressing a hand against the transparent barrier. These moments, these brief interludes of genuine wonder, kept him going through the monotony of delivery schedules and beige nutrition paste. He might have stayed longer, but a notification on his wrist console reminded him to check on Orion before his shift. The gecko required precise environmental conditions, and the station's power fluctuations sometimes affected the habitat controls. Resigned, Alden cast one last look at Earth before heading back to his quarters. The day proceeded with its usual tedium. Package retrieval from central storage, confirmation scans, delivery to designated recipients, rinse and repeat. By mid-afternoon, Alden had covered half his route and was taking his allotted break in a maintenance corridor, away from the busier thoroughfares. He unwrapped a protein bar purchased from a vending unit and leaned against a vibrating conduit pipe. The subtle hum was almost soothing, white noise against the perpetual background chatter of the station. "Courier Pritchard?" A voice startled him from his rest. Alden straightened immediately, nearly choking on a mouthful of protein bar. Standing before him was a woman he'd never seen before, tall, with silver white hair pulled back in an elaborate braid, and skin that seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality. Her uniform bore no station insignia, but instead featured an emblem he didn't recognize. A stylized asteroid, encircled by 3 intertwined serpentine forms. "Yes," he managed after swallowing hastily. "Ambassador Vela." She introduced herself with a slight inclination of her head. "Temporal Liaison Office. You're required to report to Docking Bay 17 tomorrow, at 800 hours. Alden blinked in confusion. "There must be a mistake. I'm not scheduled for any diplomatic packages. My clearance doesn't even—" "No mistake." Ambassador Vela handed him a thin metallic card embossed with official seals. "Your service has been requisitioned by authority of the High Council of Preservation. You're to prepare for immediate transfer to the chain hold." "The what?" Alden examined the card, which displayed unfamiliar authorization codes and a single directive. "Feed the dragons, report for duty at the chain hold in 24 hours. All will be explained upon arrival." The ambassador's tone suggested the conversation was over. "Pack minimally. Standard essentials only." Before Alden could formulate another question, she turned and walked away, her steps impossibly light as if gravity affected her differently. He stared at the metallic card, turning it over in his hands. Dragons, chain hold. The words made no sense. And why him? A Grade 3 courier with no special training or skills beyond navigating Auriga 9's labyrinthine corridors? When he returned to his quarters that evening, he found his delivery route had been reassigned. His station access had been modified, restricting him to his quarters, the commissary, and Docking Bay 17. Whatever this assignment was, it appeared he had no choice in the matter. He fed Orion carefully, watching the gecko snap up a synthesized insect with surprising speed. "At least you're coming with me," he told the reptile, who regarded him with what Alden chose to interpret as affection. Station regulations permitted one small pet during transfers, and he wasn't about to leave his only friend behind. Dinner was a bowl of synthesized stew that tasted better than the morning paste, but still fell short of actual food. As Alden ate, he noticed something unusual floating in the liquid, a tiny, translucent scale that caught the light with prismatic brilliance. He fished it out, examining the delicate object between his fingers. It resembled nothing he'd seen before, neither fish nor reptile, with a crystalline structure that seemed almost artificial. Curious. He set it aside rather than disposing of it, making a mental note to show it to one of the biology techs if he got the chance before his mysterious departure. Sleep proved elusive that night. Alden tossed and turned, his dreams filled with strange visions, massive winged shapes circling an asteroid fortress, chains of light binding them to a pulsing core, and himself, impossibly small, standing before creatures of cosmic majesty, with nothing but a bowl of stew in his trembling hands. He woke gasping, sheets tangled around his legs, the station's night cycle still in effect. The digital display showed Aero 300 hours, too early to rise, too late to hope for meaningful rest. With a sigh, he extricated himself from the bedding and moved to his tiny desk. The metallic card gleamed under the dim emergency lighting. Feed the dragons. Such a simple directive for what was clearly a complex assignment. Alden activated his console and searched the station database for information on chainhold and dragons, but found nothing beyond a security restriction notice. When morning finally arrived, Alden had packed his meager belongings into a standard-issue duffel. Orion was secured in a travel habitat, the tiny gecko seemingly unfazed by the prospect of relocation. At precisely Oro 755, Alden arrived at Docking Bay 17. The bay was empty, save for Ambassador Vela and 4 security officers wearing the same unfamiliar emblem. Behind them waited not a standard transport vessel, but something altogether different, a craft shaped like an elongated teardrop, its hull inscribed with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. "You're punctual," observed Vela. "A good start." "I still don't understand why I've been selected," Alden said, gripping his duffel tightly. "There must be hundreds of people more qualified for whatever this is." The ambassador's expression remained impassive. "You were chosen because you were chosen. The dragon's scale found you." Alden froze. "The scale? In my stew last night?" "A whispering scale," Vela confirmed. "They detach periodically and drift through dimensional currents. Where they land is never random." One of the security officers stepped forward, extending a hand. "The scale, please." Reluctantly, Alden retrieved the delicate object from his pocket and surrendered it. The officer placed it in a small container that sealed with a soft hiss. "The vessel awaits." Vela gestured toward the strange craft. "Your new duties begin immediately upon arrival." "And if I refuse?" The question escaped before Alden could reconsider. 4 hands moved to weapon holsters in perfect unison. "Right," Alden muttered. "Not really an option." The interior of the vessel was unlike any transport Alden had experienced. Instead of standard acceleration couches, there were contoured recesses in the floor, filled with a gel-like substance. The walls pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, casting everything in a soft, blue-green glow. "Secure yourself," instructed Vela, sliding gracefully into one of the recesses. "Dimensional transit differs from conventional space travel." Alden placed Orion's habitat in a small niche that seemed designed for cargo, and lowered himself cautiously into the nearest gel recess. The substance conformed to his body instantly, simultaneously firm and yielding. "Transit initiating," announced a voice that seemed to come from the vessel itself. Dimensional gates aligning. What followed defied description. The sensation wasn't movement as Alden understood it, not acceleration or velocity. Instead, reality itself seemed to fold around the vessel, space compressing and stretching simultaneously. Colors flashed at the periphery of his vision that had no names in human language. His body felt simultaneously infinitely heavy and weightless. And then, abruptly, it stopped. "Transit complete," the vessel's voice stated calmly. "Welcome to the chainhold." The gel recesses liquefied, allowing the passengers to rise. Alden did so unsteadily, fighting waves of nausea. Ambassador Vela and the security officers appeared entirely unaffected, watching with mild interest as he struggled to regain his equilibrium. "You adapt quickly," Vela noted. "Many require medical intervention after their first transit." "Lucky me," Alden gasped, retrieving Orion, who seemed suspiciously alert and interested in their new surroundings. "Where exactly are we?" "See for yourself," Vela gestured, and a section of the vessel's hull became transparent. Beyond lay a vista that stole Alden's breath. They had docked inside a massive structure carved from a single asteroid, its interior hollowed into cathedral-like chambers, connected by sweeping archways. Ancient stonework merged seamlessly with advanced technology. Power conduits tracing patterns alongside carved runes. Holographic displays hovering before murals of cosmic scenes. But most striking were the 3 enormous creatures that dominated the central chamber. Dragons. Not the fire-breathing beasts of ancient Earth mythology, but something far more profound. Their bodies defied consistent form, shifting between states of matter. The first radiated a soft blue luminescence, its scales rippling with temporal distortions that created afterimages and pre-echoes of its movements. The second burned with the intensity of captured starlight, orange and gold energies coruscating across its form. The third seemed composed of living shadow, regions of absolute void interrupted by pinpricks of intense light, like distant stars. All three were bound by intricate chains, not physical restraints, but complex lattices of energy that connected them to a massive mechanism embedded in the asteroid's core. The Chronos Dragon, Chrysalis. Vela indicated the blue entity. The Starfire Dragon, Pyroden. She nodded toward the golden one. And the Void Dragon, Umbraxis, she concluded, gesturing to the shadow beast. They're actual dragons, Alden whispered, awestruck. They are cosmic constants given form, corrected Vela. Manifestations of fundamental forces that shape reality. And now, Courier Pritchard, they are your responsibility. The vessel's hatch irised open, admitting a waft of air that tasted ancient and charged with strange energies. Alden followed Vela onto a docking platform, his eyes never leaving the three colossal beings. I don't understand, he admitted. What am I supposed to do with them? Feed them, came a new voice, sharp and authoritative. A woman approached across the platform, her steps precise and measured. She wore robes of deep crimson embroidered with the same serpentine symbols Alden had seen on Vela's uniform. Her face was severe, framed by dark hair streaked with silver, and her eyes held the weariness of someone who had carried a heavy burden for too long. Keeper Lysandra, Vela bowed slightly. I present Alden Pritchard, selected by the Whispering Scale. Lysandra circled Alden slowly, her expression suggesting she found him wanting in every conceivable way. This is what the Scale chose? A station courier? The scales do not err, Vela replied evenly. We shall see. Lysandra's tone made it clear she harbored significant doubts. You, she addressed Alden directly, will attend the evening feeding. Observe carefully. Your training begins immediately. Without waiting for a response, she turned and strode away. The security officers followed, leaving Alden alone with Vela and his increasingly agitated gecko. She seems intense, Alden observed. Keeper Lysandra has served the chainhold for 27 years, Vela explained. The responsibility has taken its toll. And now that responsibility passes to me. Why? What happened to the previous keeper? A shadow passed over Vela's features. Keeper Martel sought to change the established protocols. The consequences were unfortunate. Before Alden could press for clarification, Vela guided him from the platform toward a small antechamber carved into the asteroid stone. These will be your quarters. Rest and prepare. The feeding ritual begins at what you would call sunset. The room was Spartan but not uncomfortable. A sleeping platform more substantial than his station bunk. A small food preparation area, storage niches, and a hygiene facility comprised the essentials. A terrarium had been prepared for Orion, more elaborate than his habitat on Auriga 9. Someone expected me to bring him, Alden noted, carefully transferring the gecko to his new home. The scales see much, Vela replied enigmatically. I leave you now. Lysandra will summon you when it's time. Alone in the strange quarters, Alden sank onto the sleeping platform and buried his face in his hands. 24 hours ago, he had been a nobody courier on a space station. Now he was expected to feed cosmic entities on an asteroid fortress, somewhere beyond conventional space. What do dragons even eat? He asked Orion, who offered no insights beyond a flick of his tongue. The answer, as Alden discovered that evening, was both simpler and more complex than he could have imagined. Lysandra arrived precisely when Vela had predicted, her expression no warmer than before. Come, she commanded. "Bring nothing. You will need only your attention." Alden followed her through a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each more elaborate than the last. The deeper they ventured into the chain-hold, the more Alden sensed a rhythm underlying everything, a pulse that resonated through stone and metal alike. "The heartbeat of the reality engine," Lysandra explained when she noticed his reaction. "The dragon's presence stabilizes it. Their feeding calibrates it. This is the true purpose of the chain-hold. Not to imprison them, but to harness their essence in service to cosmic equilibrium." They emerged into the vast central chamber Alden had glimpsed from the vessel. Up close, the dragons were even more magnificent and terrifying. Chrysalis, the Chronos dragon, existed in multiple moments simultaneously, parts of its form fading into the past while others pushed into the future. Pyroden smoldered with barely contained stellar fire, the air around it wavering with heat. Umbraxis seemed to devour light itself, the void of its body a window into absolute nothingness. All three turned their attention to Alden as he entered, their gazes piercing and ancient beyond comprehension. They sensed the scale's choice. Lysandra observed. "Stand here. Observe. Speak only if addressed directly." At the center of the chamber stood a massive circular platform inscribed with intricate symbols. Lysandra ascended a short staircase to its surface and raised her arms in a formal gesture. "I commence the ritual of sustenance," she intoned. "Let the boundaries be observed, the balances maintained, the cosmic flow preserved in its proper channels." From recesses around the chamber emerged attendants bearing strange containers, crystalline vessels, containers of what appeared to be liquid fire, and peculiar vacuum spheres that seemed to contain absence itself. "For Chrysalis, keeper of moments," Lysandra announced, "I prepare the distillation of sequential reality." She took a crystalline vessel and emptied its contents, glittering sand-like particles, into a mortar. With practiced movements, she ground the particles with a pestle until they emitted soft blue light. The resulting substance she transferred to a shallow bowl. "For Pyroden, master of energy," she continued, "I forge the concentrated potential." Taking tongs, she lifted what appeared to be a small coal of impossible brightness from one of the fire containers. She placed it on an anvil-like surface and struck it 3 times with a hammer. Each blow released a shower of sparks that coalesced into a swirling orb of golden light. "For Umbraxis, guardian of absence," she concluded, "I distill the essence of the void." The final preparation involved a vacuum sphere that Lysandra manipulated with reverent caution. She extracted what seemed to be nothing at all, yet Alden could perceive a difference in the air where she worked, a deepening of shadows, a thinning of substance. When all 3 offerings were prepared, Lysandra arranged them on the platform in a triangular pattern. She then stepped back and spoke words in a language Alden didn't recognize, syllables that seemed to fold back on themselves in impossible ways. The dragons responded. Chrysalis extended a limb that existed in multiple time frames simultaneously, drawing the blue particles upward in a spiraling stream. Pyroden's maw opened, inhaling the golden energy orb from afar. Umbraxis simply intensified, the prepared void collapsing into its form like water down a drain. As they fed, the chains binding them to the reality engine pulsed with increased luminosity. The underlying rhythm Alden had sensed earlier grew stronger, more defined. "The feeding calibrates their connection to the engine," Lysandra explained quietly. "Too much sustenance, and they grow restless, straining against their bonds. Too little, and they weaken, disrupting the engine's function. Perfect balance must be maintained." The ritual concluded with another formal incantation. The dragons settled into relatively stable forms, their attention drifting from the humans below. "You will prepare tomorrow's feeding," Lysandra informed Alden as they departed the chamber. "I will observe. But I don't know how to make any of those things," Alden protested. "You will learn," she replied simply. The knowledge has already been placed in your quarters. Study it tonight. Be prepared by morning." Indeed. When Alden returned to his room, he found a leather-bound volume waiting on his sleeping platform. Its pages contained detailed instructions for the preparation of Chronos shards, solar embers, and void essence, the three substances he had watched Lysandra prepare. The diagrams were intricate, the text dense with alchemical terminology and dimensional mathematics. Alden's head swam as he tried to absorb the information. He had never been a brilliant student, adequate at required subjects, but unremarkable in academic pursuits. Nothing in his education or career had prepared him for cosmic gastronomy. "This is insane," he told Orion, who watched him from the terrarium with unusual intensity. "I'm going to poison reality itself." The gecko tilted his head, blinking one eye, then the other. "Easy for you to say," Alden muttered. "You're not the one who has to pulverize time tomorrow." He studied late into the night cycle, falling asleep with the tome open across his chest. His dreams were fragmented, visions of the dragons consuming galaxies, himself trapped in the grinding gears of an enormous cosmic machine, and strange whispers that seemed to come from Orion, though the gecko's mouth never moved. Morning arrived with a chime from a communication panel he hadn't noticed before. Lysandra's voice emerged, clipped and impatient. "Preparation chamber. 1 hour." Alden splashed water on his face, changed into the robes that had been provided for him, similar to Lysandra's, but in a muted gray rather than crimson, and spent a few precious minutes with Orion. "Wish me luck," he said, offering the gecko a small, synthesized insect from his dwindling supply. "If I'm not back by evening, it probably means I've unraveled the fabric of existence." The preparation chamber was adjacent to the main feeding hall, a laboratory-like space filled with equipment, both recognizable and utterly alien. Workbenches held devices that resembled scientific instruments, crossed with ritual objects. Storage units contained labeled specimens and substances that defied conventional classification. Lysandra waited, arms crossed, her expression suggesting she expected failure. "Begin with the Chronos shards," she instructed. "They require the most precision." According to the manual, Chronos shards were harvested from temporal anomalies that occurred naturally in certain regions of space. The raw material resembled glittering crystal formations, but each fragment existed partially outside normal time, making them difficult to handle and dangerous if misprocessed. Alden approached the task with trepidation, following the diagrams as exactly as possible. He placed the raw shards in a containment field, adjusted the temporal stabilizers, and began the grinding process using a mortar and pestle crafted from an unknown alloy. "More pressure," Lysandra critiqued. "The particles must be reduced to their essential state." Alden complied, increasing the force of his grinding. The shards resisted before suddenly yielding, collapsing into the fine blue particles he had seen the previous day. "Acceptable," Lysandra acknowledged grudgingly. "Now the solar embers." This process proved more challenging. The raw material was literally a fragment of a star, contained in a stasis field that had to be precisely modulated during processing. The heat was intense, even through protective barriers, and the hammerwork required exact timing. Alden's first attempt failed spectacularly. The ember flared too brightly and dissipated into useless radiation. "Again!" Lysandra commanded, retrieving another stasis container. "Control your strikes. Feel the resonance." His second attempt fared better. The ember responded to his hammer blows, compressing and stabilizing into the golden orb he'd witnessed in the feeding ritual. It wasn't as perfectly formed as Lysandra's had been, but it held its shape. "It will suffice," she conceded. "Finally, the void essence." This proved the most conceptually difficult task. Working with nothingness required a peculiar mental discipline, focusing on absence rather than presence. Alden struggled to manipulate the vacuum spheres, his frustration mounting as Lysandra offered minimal guidance. "You must perceive the spaces between," she said cryptically. "Not the container, but what it fails to contain." After several false starts, Alden managed to produce something approximating the void essence he'd seen prepared the previous day. Lysandra examined it critically, but nodded. "You have completed the basic preparations," she announced. "Tonight, you will conduct the feeding under my supervision." The prospect filled Alden with dread. "What if I make a mistake? What happens to the dragons if the feeding isn't right?" "Minor imbalances are correctable," Lysandra replied. "Major failures." She left the thought unfinished, her expression darkening. The last keeper who significantly disrupted the feeding pattern caused a dimensional tremor that destroyed 3 minor realities. Alden swallowed hard. No pressure, then. Throughout the day, Alden encountered other inhabitants of the chainhold, technicians maintaining the reality engine, scholars studying the dragons from observation platforms, and representatives from various human colonies who seemed to regard the facility with religious reverence. Many viewed him with open skepticism or thinly veiled contempt. A group of station-born nobles, immediately recognizable by their elaborate attire and affected accents, made their disdain particularly clear. "So this is the new keeper?" one remarked loudly, as Alden passed. "A common courier. The standards have fallen indeed." "The dragons are merely relics," another replied dismissively. "Ceremonial curiosities from a bygone age. It hardly matters who tends them now." Alden ignored them as best he could, focusing instead on reviewing the ritual procedures for the evening feeding. But their words stung nonetheless, reinforcing his own doubts. Who was he to shoulder such responsibility? What qualifications did he possess beyond being struck by a wayward scale? Memories of past failures haunted him. Academic disappointments, career stagnation, relationships that had withered through neglect or incompetence. His life on Auriga 9 had been unremarkable by design, a comfortable mediocrity that demanded little and expected less. Now he stood at the nexus of cosmic forces, with the stability of reality itself, potentially resting on his ability to properly prepare meals for interdimensional entities. "I can't do this," he confessed to Orion upon returning to his quarters. "I'm going to fail spectacularly, and who knows what will happen then." The gecko regarded him with that same unusual intensity, then deliberately turned in a circle on his heated rock. "Very helpful," Alden sighed. "When the universe collapses, I'm blaming you." Evening arrived too quickly. Lysandra appeared at his door in full ceremonial regalia, her crimson robes now augmented with metallic components that resonated with the reality engine's pulse. "It is time," she announced. "Bring the preparations." Alden carefully transported the 3 substances he had created earlier. They seemed stable, though the chronos shards occasionally emitted soft blue flashes, and the solar ember pulsed with its captured stellar energy. The feeding hall had filled with observers, scholars, nobles, and officials stationed in viewing galleries above the central platform. Their murmurs created a background hum that set Alden's nerves further on edge. "They come to witness the ritual," Lysandra explained. "Many believe it brings good fortune or insights into future developments." "No pressure," Alden muttered for the second time that day. The dragons appeared more active than they had the previous evening. Chrysalis's temporal distortions reached further from its form. Pyridon's stellar fire burned with increased intensity. Umbraxis seemed to consume more light, the darkness of its form deepening. "They sense a new keeper," Lysandra observed. "They test boundaries." She led Alden to the central platform and positioned him before the 3 prepared substances. "Begin the ritual as I instructed. The words must be precise." Drawing a deep breath, Alden raised his arms as he had seen Lysandra do. "I commence the ritual of sustenance," he began, his voice shakier than he would have liked. "Let the boundaries be observed, the balances maintained, the cosmic flow preserved in its proper channels." The chamber fell silent, Even the dragons seemed to still, their attention focusing on him with unnerving intensity. For Chrysalis, keeper of moments, he continued, lifting the bowl of chronos shards, I prepare the distillation of sequential reality. The blue particles rose slightly from the bowl, responding to the dragon's proximity. For Pyroden, master of energy, I forge the concentrated potential. The golden ember flared brighter as he presented it. For Umbraxas, guardian of absence, I distill the essence of the void. The void essence deepened, shadows within shadows. Now came the final incantation, the words he had memorized from Lysandra's demonstration, but whose meaning remained obscure. Alden spoke carefully, trying to replicate the peculiar cadence and pronunciation. As the last syllable left his lips, the dragons moved in unison, consuming their respective offerings. The chains binding them to the reality engine pulsed with energy. The rhythm beneath everything stabilized. Alden released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had done it, completed the ritual without catastrophe. But something felt incomplete. The dragons, having consumed their offerings, remained unusually alert, their attention fixed on him, rather than drifting as they had after Lysandra's feeding. They await the closure, Lysandra prompted quietly. Complete the ritual. Alden recited the final phrases, as instructed. The dragons gradually settled, the intensity of their focus diminishing. The observers in the galleries began to disperse. The event concluded. You performed adequately, Lysandra acknowledged as they left the feeding hall. With practice, you may become competent. From her, this apparently constituted high praise. What happens now? Alden asked. Now you continue your training. Each day, you will prepare the offerings. Each evening, you will conduct the feeding. In time, you will take full responsibility for the chainhold's primary function. And you? A flash of something, relief, resignation, crossed Lysandra's features. I have served my appointed time. When you are deemed ready, I will depart for the final transition. She didn't elaborate on what that meant, and Alden didn't press. He was too overwhelmed by the immediate reality of his new role to worry about its ultimate conclusion. Days passed in a blur of training and ritual. Alden gradually improved his preparation techniques, learning the subtle variations required for different phases of cosmic alignment. The dragons accepted his offerings without incident, though they maintained an intensity of focus that Lysandra found unusual. They watch you too closely, she remarked after one feeding. It is not the normal pattern. Is that dangerous? Alden asked. Uncertain, she replied. The dragon's interest is seldom benign. When not engaged in official duties, Alden explored the chainhold's less restricted areas. The asteroid fortress contained libraries of ancient knowledge, observatories monitoring distant realities, and meditation chambers where scholars contemplated the nature of existence. He also discovered he was not the only new arrival. The High Council of Preservation had dispatched an envoy named Talos to audit the chainhold's operations. Tall and austere, with the enhanced physiology of someone born in high orbit. Talos carried himself with the absolute confidence of a true believer in the cosmic order. The Council requires reassurance that transitions proceed smoothly, he explained during their first meeting. Recent disturbances have caused concern. Disturbances? Alden questioned. Temporal fluctuations. Energy surges. Nothing you need concern yourself with. Talos dismissed. Focus on your duties, keeper apprentice. Leave broader matters to those equipped to understand them. The condescension was familiar. The same tone the station-born nobles used when addressing anyone they deemed inferior. Alden had spent a lifetime being spoken to this way, accepting his place in the hierarchy without complaint. But something had changed. Perhaps it was the dragon's influence, or simply the remarkable circumstance of his new position. But Alden found himself unwilling to accept such dismissal. As the one responsible for feeding cosmic constants, he replied evenly. I think broader matters are precisely my concern. Talos's expression hardened. Mind your station, courier. The Council's selection of you remains a mystery to many. Don't provide reasons to question it further. The encounter left Alden unsettled. What broader matters was Talos referring to? What disturbances had attracted the Council's attention? That night, unable to sleep, Alden wandered the Chainhold's corridors. The reality engine's pulse seemed uneven. The rhythm he had grown accustomed to slightly off-tempo. Following the sensation, he found himself in a section of the asteroid he hadn't explored before. Older chambers with worn carvings and antiquated technology. One room in particular drew his attention. Unlike the grand spaces of the main complex, this was a simple dwelling. Personal quarters long abandoned. Dust-covered surfaces, and power systems had been deactivated, leaving only emergency lighting functioning. "Keeper Martel's chambers," came a voice behind him. Alden turned to find Ambassador Vela watching from the doorway. She had been largely absent since his arrival, engaged in diplomatic functions elsewhere in the Chainhold. "The previous keeper?" Alden asked. "What happened to him?" Vela entered the room, her silver-white hair catching the dim light. "He believed the traditional feeding regime was inadequate, that the dragons required different sustenance." "Different how?" "That is what the Council wishes to determine," she replied carefully. Martel's experiments ended in what was officially termed catastrophic dimensional destabilization. He did not survive. Alden surveyed the abandoned quarters with renewed interest. "And the Council sent Talos to ensure I don't repeat his mistakes." "Among other reasons," Vela acknowledged. "You should not be here. Keeper Apprentice. These chambers remain sealed for investigation." Despite her words, she made no move to prevent Alden's exploration. He examined the room more carefully, noting subtle details, star charts with unusual annotations, crystalline devices of unknown purpose, and most intriguingly, a small shelf of handwritten journals. "Were these Martel's records?" he asked, reaching for one. "Personal observations," Vela confirmed. "Considered unreliable by Council standards." Before she could object, Alden opened the journal. Most entries were technical notations beyond his current understanding, but certain phrases caught his attention. Conventional feeding maintains stasis rather than balance. And dragons consume possibility, not substance. And, most intriguingly, they hunger for transitional states, not fixed elements. "You should return to your quarters," Vela suggested, though her tone lacked urgency. "Morning preparation begins early." Alden nodded, but slipped the journal into his robe before departing. Something told him Vela had deliberately allowed him this discovery, perhaps even guided him to it. Back in his quarters, Orion watched with apparent interest as Alden examined the journal more thoroughly. The gecko had grown increasingly alert during their time in the Chainhold, his behavior suggesting an awareness beyond normal reptilian capacity. "Something strange is happening here," Alden told his pet. "The official story doesn't match what I'm seeing." The journal contained detailed observations of the dragon's behavior over years of feeding rituals. Martel had documented subtle variations in their responses to different preparations, noting patterns that suggested the creatures weren't merely consuming the offered substances, but something more abstract contained within them. One passage particularly resonated. "The Chronos dragon doesn't consume time particles, but the potential transitions between moments. The Starfire dragon feeds not on stellar energy, but on the transformative process of matter becoming energy. The Void dragon sustains itself not on emptiness, but on the conceptual space between existence and non-existence." A final entry, dated shortly before Martel's catastrophic experiment, read, "Tomorrow I serve them pure transition, the state of becoming itself. If my theory holds, they will thrive as never before, and the reality engine will achieve perfect harmonization without the need for chains." Alden closed the journal, Mind racing. If Martel was correct. The traditional feeding regime maintained by Lysandra and the Council actually constrained the dragons rather than sustaining them properly. But experimenting with alternatives had apparently led to disaster. "What would you do, Orion?" he asked. The gecko performed an elaborate series of movements on his heated rock, circling, pausing, tilting his head, and blinking in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Alden laughed softly. "If I didn't know better, I'd think you were trying to tell me something." The next morning, Alden prepared the traditional offerings under Lysandra's supervision. But as he worked, he subtly modified the processes based on Martel's notes, not enough to create visibly different results, but incorporating the concept of transitional states into each preparation. For the Chronos shards, he ground them while mentally focusing on the moment between past and future, the perpetual becoming of the present. For the solar ember, he concentrated on the transformation point where matter converts to energy. For the void essence, he contemplated the boundary between being and non-being. The differences were imperceptible to visual inspection, but Alden sensed a change in the energetic quality of each offering. Whether this would affect the feeding remained to be seen. That evening, with Lysandra observing and Talos watching from the galleries, Alden conducted the ritual as usual. The dragons approached their offerings with typical attentiveness, but their consumption was notably different. Chrysalis absorbed the Chronos shards more completely, temporal distortions momentarily stabilizing into a singular present. Pyridin's flames focused to a pure white brilliance before returning to their normal golden hue. Umbraxis briefly achieved a perfect balance between darkness and light, neither dominating. The chains binding them to the reality engine pulsed with unusual patterns, the underlying rhythm shifting to a more complex cadence. Alden felt the change resonate through the asteroid itself, not a disruption, but a harmonization. Lysandra noticed immediately. "What did you do?" she demanded, as they left the feeding hall. "I followed the protocol," Alden replied carefully, "exactly as trained. The dragons responded differently. The engine's resonance pattern has altered." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You changed something." "Perhaps they're simply adjusting to a new keeper," Alden suggested. Lysandra seemed unconvinced but couldn't identify any specific deviation. "You will be monitored more closely," she warned. "Talos has expressed concerns about your suitability." Indeed. The council envoy increased his scrutiny in the days that followed. Alden found himself accompanied by observers during preparations, his movements analyzed for any departure from established procedures. Despite this, he continued his subtle experimentations, guided by Martel's journal and his own growing intuition. Each feeding produced small, but noticeable changes in the dragon's behavior and the reality engine's rhythm. One evening, after a particularly successful feeding, Alden remained in the chamber after the observers had departed. The dragons, normally quiescent after consumption, remained alert and focused on him. "You understand what I'm trying to do," he said quietly, uncertain if they could comprehend human speech, but compelled to communicate nonetheless. "I'm trying to give you what you actually need, not just what tradition dictates." Chrysalis, the Chronos dragon, extended a temporal limb toward him, not physically reaching across the chamber, but stretching through the possibilities of space-time to manifest closer to Alden. The sensation of multiple realities converging made him dizzy, but he stood his ground. A voice entered his mind, not sound, but pure concept, translated imperfectly into words. "The small one sees. The small one knows hunger beyond feeding." Alden gasped. "You can communicate!" "Always communicating," came the reply. "Few listening. Previous keeper began to hear. Now you—" "Martel," Alden realized. "He understood what you needed." "Understood, but moved too quickly. Balance requires gradual transition." "What are you?" Alden asked. Not what the Council claims, I think. A new consciousness touched his mind. Fiercer, brighter, the essence of Pyroden. We are change embodied, transformation incarnate. Without us, reality stagnates. The third presence entered, Umbraxis, vast and cool and limitless. The engine was built to harness us, the chains to control us, the feeding to sedate us. But why? Alden questioned. What is the reality engine's true purpose? The answer came from all three simultaneously, concepts overlapping in a symphony of meaning. To prevent cosmic evolution, to maintain the Council's preferred state of existence, to deny the natural cycle of universal death and rebirth. The revelation staggered Alden. They're using you to freeze reality in its current form? To prevent change itself? Yes, Chrysalis confirmed. What should flow? They dam. What should transform? They preserve. What should end and begin anew? They artificially extend. And Martel discovered this, Alden concluded. He tried to free you. Too suddenly. Pyroden's consciousness warned. Chains broken without preparation cause damage. Small realities shattered. The way must be gradual, Umbraxis added. Feeding changed. Chains weakened. Engine recalibrated. Why me? Alden asked. Why choose a station courier with no special abilities? No preconceptions, came Chrysalis's response. No loyalty to Council doctrine. Simple hunger for meaning beyond routine. The scale finds those with potential for transformation. Pyroden explained. You exist in your own transitional state, between acceptance and rebellion. Also, Umbraxis added with what felt remarkably like humor. Your small companion is more than appears. Alden blinked. Orion, my gecko. Before the dragons could elaborate, a noise at the chamber entrance broke the connection. Talos stood watching, his expression unreadable. Communing with the subjects? He asked coldly. Fascinating habit. Keeper apprentice. One the Council will find most interesting. Alden struggled to compose himself, the dragon's revelations still reverberating through his mind. I was completing post-feeding observations, he lied, as specified in the protocols. Indeed. Talos's tone made it clear he didn't believe this explanation. You should know the High Council arrives tomorrow for a full inspection. They are concerned about anomalies in the engine's output. I wasn't aware of any problems, Alden replied carefully. That's because you lack the necessary understanding. Talos dismissed. Prepare for comprehensive review of your procedures. The Council tolerates no deviations. After the envoy departed, Alden hurried back to his quarters. Orion awaited on his heated rock, eyes alert and focused. More than appears, huh? Alden addressed the gecko directly. Care to explain? The reptile blinked slowly, then deliberately raised a foot and tapped it 3 times against the stone. Either I'm losing my mind, or you're trying to communicate, Alden mused. Let's try something simple. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no. Are you more than a gecko? 1 deliberate tap. Are you working with the dragons somehow? 1 tap. Were you placed in my care deliberately? 1 tap. Alden sat heavily on his sleeping platform. This is insane. I'm having a conversation with my pet gecko about a cosmic conspiracy. Orion tapped once emphatically. I need to know more about what Martel discovered, Alden decided, retrieving the journal. If the Council arrives tomorrow, time is running out. He spent hours studying the later entries, piecing together Martel's final theories. The previous keeper had concluded that the reality engine wasn't merely a stabilizing mechanism, but a control device, designed to prevent cosmic cycles that would naturally result in universal rebirth. The Council of Preservation, true to its name, sought eternal continuation of the current cosmic paradigm. The dragons, as incarnations of transformative forces, represented both tools to achieve this goal and threats to its maintenance. Martel's final experiment had attempted to feed the dragons pure conceptual transition, offering them their natural sustenance, rather than the diluted, controlling substances of tradition. But the abrupt change had caused a catastrophic reaction. The dragon's powers briefly unleashed in ways that damaged nearby realities. "He moved too fast," Alden murmured. But the basic theory was sound. A sudden understanding dawned. Tomorrow's inspection provided both danger and opportunity. If the Council recognized his subtle modifications, he would likely share Martel's fate. But if he could demonstrate a controlled, beneficial adjustment to the feeding regime, he might convince at least some observers that change was necessary. Morning arrived with increased activity throughout the chainhold. The High Council's arrival precipitated elaborate preparations, ceremonial decorations, security enhancements, and a general atmosphere of tense anticipation. Lysandra appeared at Alden's quarters earlier than usual, her expression grave. "The Council requires a demonstration feeding as part of their inspection," she informed him. "You will prepare offerings under direct observation." "I understand," Alden replied, projecting a calm he didn't feel. The preparation chamber had been modified for the occasion. Observation platforms surrounded the work area, and recording devices monitored every aspect of the process. Council members in elaborate regalia watched with clinical detachment as Alden gathered his materials. Talos stood closest, his scrutiny unwavering. "Proceed exactly according to established protocol," he instructed. "Any deviation will be noted and addressed." Alden began with the Chronos shards, performing each step with deliberate precision. Outwardly, he followed every technical aspect of the procedure. Inwardly, he focused more intensely than ever on the concept of transition, the becoming rather than the being. As he worked, he noticed something unusual. Where his fingers contacted the materials, subtle changes occurred. Chronos shards glowed more vibrantly, solar fragments burned more purely, void essence deepened more profoundly. It was as if something within him was amplifying the transitional qualities. The council members noticed too. Murmurs spread through the observation platforms, and instruments registered unusual readings. "What are you doing?" Talos demanded. "The energy signatures are irregular." "I'm following the protocol exactly," Alden replied truthfully. The physical procedures were identical to tradition, only his mental focus differed. Lysandra studied the preparations with growing concern. "They are changing as he touches them," she observed. "Some property is transferring from keeper to offering." "Impossible," declared one council member, an elderly woman with cybernetic enhancements. "The keeper is merely a conduit, not a component of the feeding." Yet the evidence before them suggested otherwise. The completed offerings radiated unusual potency, their energies interacting in patterns never before recorded. "Proceed with the feeding," the council leader finally ordered. "We will observe the results directly." The feeding hall had been prepared for the official inspection. The reality engine's core components were exposed for analysis, their connections to the dragon's chains clearly visible. Council technicians monitored every aspect of the system, ready to intervene at the first sign of instability. Alden took his position on the central platform, the three enhanced offerings arranged before him. The dragons seemed more alert than ever, their attention focused not just on him, but on something within him. He began the ritual with the traditional words, but as he spoke, he infused each phrase with new meaning, emphasizing transition and transformation rather than preservation and control. The offerings responded, their energies intensifying. "For Chrysalis, keeper of moments," he intoned, "I prepare not just the distillation of sequential reality, but the essence of becoming, the state between what was and what will be." The Chronos shards rose from their container, swirling in patterns that traced possible futures and alternate pasts. "For Pyroden, master of energy, I forge not merely concentrated potential, but the transformative power that turns matter to energy, and energy to matter." the process of cosmic alchemy itself. The solar ember expanded, its golden light shifting through the entire spectrum before stabilizing as a perfect white star. For Umbraxis, guardian of absence, I distill not simple void, but the creative emptiness from which all possibility emerges, the space between existence that allows existence to be. The void essence deepened beyond darkness, becoming a window into infinite potential. Gasps and exclamations erupted from the council observers. Alarms sounded as instruments registered unprecedented energy patterns. "Stop the ritual!" Talos commanded. "He deviates from protocol!" But it was too late. The dragons moved in perfect synchrony, consuming the offerings not as separate entities, but as a unified cosmic force. The chains binding them to the reality engine glowed white-hot, their structures beginning to shimmer and distort. "What have you done?" Lysandra cried, genuine fear in her voice for the first time. "Given them what they truly need," Alden replied, standing firm as energies swirled around the chamber. "Not what controls them." The reality engine's pulse changed, not faltering, but transforming, its rhythm shifting from rigid precision to organic flow. The dragon's form stabilized, becoming more defined and present than Alden had ever seen them. The small one succeeds where the previous failed. Chrysalis's voice resonated in the minds of all present. Gradual transition preserves structure while allowing evolution. The council members recoiled in shock. Many had never experienced direct dragon communication, believing the creatures to be merely cosmic forces without consciousness. "We are not your tools," Pyridin's voice blazed. "We are the architects of universal renewal." "Your fear of ending prevents new beginning," Umbraxis added. "You preserve what should transform." "Containment protocols!" the council leader shouted. "Activate emergency restraints!" Technicians scrambled to comply. But the reality engine had already begun reconfiguring. The dragon's chains, while not completely broken, had softened, allowing greater freedom of movement and expression. In the midst of the chaos, Alden felt a peculiar sensation, as if something within him was awakening in response to the dragon's liberation. Energy coursed through his body, reminiscent of the cosmic scale that had first connected him to this strange destiny. "Orion," he whispered, suddenly understanding. "It wasn't just the scale that chose me." At that moment, the small gecko appeared, impossibly, in the feeding hall, having somehow transported from Alden's quarters. But the creature that scurried up Alden's robe to perch on his shoulder bore only a passing resemblance to a simple reptile. Orion's form now shimmered with the same energies that characterized the dragons, his eyes reflecting cosmic awareness. "Guardian and Catalyst," the dragon's voices explained in unison, placed to guide when the time came. The council forces surrounded the central platform, weapons and containment devices ready. Talos stepped forward, his expression cold with fury. "You have committed the highest treason against cosmic order," he accused. "The penalty is absolute erasure from all realities. The only crime here is imprisonment of forces necessary for universal health," Alden countered, surprising himself with his newfound confidence. "The dragons aren't dangerous. They're essential." "Ignorant fool," spat the council leader. "Without strict control, their powers would destroy civilization itself. The last universal cycle ended all previous progress. We prevent that catastrophe from recurring." "You prevent natural renewal," Alden argued. "Everything that lives must eventually die and be reborn, even universes." As the confrontation escalated, something unexpected occurred. Several council members and Chainhold staff moved to stand beside Alden, including, most surprisingly, Lysandra herself. "I have served the feeding protocols faithfully for 27 years, she announced. "But I have seen the engine's rhythms grow increasingly discordant. Perhaps Martel was right. Perhaps Alden is right." "Treason spreads like contagion," Talos snarled. "Contain them all." But the dragons had used this moment of distraction to continue their subtle liberation. The chains, while still attached, had reconfigured into more flexible connections, less restraints than conduits. "We offer balance," Chrysalis proposed. "Not freedom without structure, but structure that allows growth. Not stagnation, not chaos." Pyroden elaborated. "Dynamic equilibrium. Death and rebirth on natural timescales." Umbraxis concluded. "Measured in billions of your years, not artificial eternity." The reality engine pulsed with new vitality, its energies flowing through the chamber in patterns of extraordinary beauty and complexity. Those present felt not destruction, but profound integration, a sense of rightness that transcended intellectual understanding. This is not what Martel caused," Lysandra observed in wonder. "There is no destabilization, only recalibration." "The difference," Alden explained, "is gradual transition rather than sudden release. Feeding them properly allows controlled evolution instead of catastrophic change." The council remained divided, some members perceiving the truth of this demonstration, others clinging to fear and doctrine. The leader hesitated, weapons still trained on Alden and his allies. "You risk everything on unproven theory," she accused. "You risk everything on the assumption that natural cosmic processes are inherently destructive," Alden countered. "Look around you. Is this destruction, or is it balance?" The evidence was difficult to deny. Throughout the chainhold, systems that had required constant maintenance were stabilizing naturally. The asteroid structure, long threatened by dimensional stresses, settled into strengthened configurations. Even the very fabric of local spacetime exhibited improved coherence. "We propose a new covenant," Alden suggested. "One that honors the dragon's nature while preserving cosmic stability. Not chains of control, but partnerships of mutual benefit." Hours of tense negotiation followed. The dragons, now able to communicate directly with all present, participated actively in the discussion. Technical experts analyzed the reality engine's new operational parameters, confirming that while changed, it remained functional, arguably more efficiently than before. Gradually, a new consensus emerged. The High Council, while not fully convinced, acknowledged that the immediate results contradicted their worst fears. A compromise was reached. The feeding protocols would be modified to incorporate Alden's methods, with careful monitoring of results over an extended period. "You will bear responsibility for any consequences," the council leader informed Alden sternly. "If destabilization occurs, the original protocols will be reinstated immediately." "Understood," Alden agreed. "But I believe you'll find reality itself functions better when its foundational forces are properly nourished, rather than merely controlled." As the crisis subsided, and the chainhold adjusted to its new operational paradigm, Alden found himself in a position he could never have imagined during his days as a station courier. The council formally appointed him headkeeper, with Lysandra serving as his advisor, rather than superior. "You have vision I lacked," she admitted in a rare moment of humility. "I maintain tradition without questioning its foundation." "You did what you believed was right," Alden assured her. As did Martel, in his way. He simply moved too quickly. Orion, or whatever the creature truly was, remained Alden's constant companion, though he no longer pretended to be merely a gecko. His form shifted subtly, depending on circumstances, sometimes appearing almost dragon-like in miniature. Guardian and Catalyst. He explained when they were alone, his thoughts now clear in Alden's mind. Placed to watch for the one who could implement change without destruction. "And you chose me because you understand balance, not too rigid, not too chaotic, capable of growth without shattering existing structures." In the months that followed, the effects of the new feeding regime spread beyond the chainhold. Throughout human-occupied space, Subtle changes manifested, not as disruption, but as enhanced possibility. Auriga 9 and other stations reported increased efficiency in systems that had previously required constant adjustment. Scientists noted improved stability in dimensional interfaces that had long been problematic. Most significantly, cultural and social structures began gentle, organic evolution. Rigid hierarchies softened without collapsing. Innovation flourished where stagnation had prevailed. It was as if reality itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The dragons, while still connected to the reality engine, now participated as active partners rather than constrained power sources. They guided cosmic evolution with wisdom accumulated across universal cycles, their influence bringing balance to forces that had grown increasingly discordant under artificial constraints. Alden found himself designated human consort to the celestial dragons, a title that would have seemed absurdly grandiose to his former self, but now felt like a simple description of his function. He served as interpreter between cosmic forces and human civilization, helping each understand the other's nature and needs. And through it all, the peculiar humor of his situation never escaped him. From delivering packages to delivering cosmic sustenance, it was an improbable journey that somehow made perfect sense in retrospect. One evening, as he prepared a particularly complex feeding, now more art than rigid ritual, Alden reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. The cosmic scale that had fallen into his stew seemed like both random chance and inevitable destiny. "The universe has an odd sense of humor," he remarked to Orion, who now perched on the preparation table, in a form that blended gecko and miniature dragon features. "Humor is a form of unexpected transition," Orion replied philosophically. "A shift from one understanding to another. The dragons appreciate it greatly. Is that why they chose a courier for cosmic comedy?" "They chose someone who delivers. It seemed appropriate for one who would deliver them from chains." Alden laughed, the sound echoing through chambers that had once known only solemn silence. In that moment, he understood perhaps the most important lesson of his journey. True balance required not just order, but joy. Not just purpose, but appreciation of life's inherent absurdity. As Auriga 9 and the wider human civilization adjusted to reality's gentle flux, as old structures reconfigured and cultures evolved, Alden Pritchard, once an unremarkable courier, now a cosmic catalyst, continued his improbable duty with both dedication and delight. He had only had one job: feed the dragons. No one, least of all himself, had expected what he would serve them. But as it turned out, possibility itself made the perfect meal.